Hi, friends. Welcome to the Hey Fundraiser podcast. I'm your host, Mary Peterson, and whether you're a frontline fundraiser, an executive director, a board member, or someone just wanting to make an impact in your community, this podcast is for you. We cover all facets of fundraising, and our main objective is to give you ideas and inspiration to help you raise more money. Join us as we grow, learn, and make an impact together. Hey, fundraiser. Welcome to today's podcast, where we are going to unpack the 5 biggest mistakes that major gift fundraisers make during solicitations. So raise your hand if you've ever walked out of a donor meeting and thought, oh my gosh, I totally messed that up. Like, just so you know, you can't see me, my hand is raised. We've all been there. I have had awesome wins and awesome failures. And it's really those failures that you really learn to get through it. So today I want to break down the top mistakes that my coaching clients are making and that I counsel them on every single day, because I don't want you to make these same mistakes. So all the advice today is going to help you avoid these mistakes. Solicitation of a major gift is a lot on its own. It's stressful. It should be very joyful, but it tends to be very stressful. Like there's this uncertainty, and uncertainty leads to anxiety. You don't know what the donor is going to say, which starts to play a little bit of a head game with yourself, because you start to think all of the things, and all of the things are not always the positive things. If you're anything like me, you're thinking like, oh my gosh, what if I ruin this relationship? What if they say no and kick me out of their home? I mean, I just go to these crazy extreme places. None of that has ever happened. But over the last 25 years, I've thought it with almost every solicitation. Let's dig into mistake number 1. This is asking too soon. You don't want to rush. A great solicitation is 90% cultivation, 10% ask. What I mean by this is you have to build a really rock solid relationship, and you need to know several things before you ask for a gift. For example, you want to know why they give to your organization. You want to know what you want to ask for. You want to know what program or project they care most about. You want to know if they're a donor that gives from their head, from their heart, or from their gut. Like, these are just little things that you learn during cultivation that help you get a yes. We don't want to rush the solicitation. Now, if you're part of my Major Gift Momentum or my fundraising collective, you know that I love an expedited timeline when it comes to major gifts. And the logic behind that is that your clients, the people you serve, whether it's the environment, if you're serving the arts, kids, education, healthcare, whatever it is, whoever you're serving, they don't have really time to wait. And the philanthropist wants to make sustainable, impactful change today, not in 2 years. So if you've, listened to former podcasts or you work with me, you know that I like smaller portfolios and to go much deeper relationships. What that does is allows you to really focus. I mean, pick your top 20 prospects and really go deep with them. And if you're spending 90% of your time on cultivation and you're really focused on who you're talking with, then you're going to just get to the ask in a quicker time. So it's not really about rushing. It's just going deeper, quicker. So mistake number 1, asking too soon. You don't want to do that. That you're kind of like cutting your nose off to spite your face is kind of what they say. So think the long game. I mean, you don't want to wait too long, but you don't want to ask too soon. Mistake number 2 is talking too much. When we get nervous, and we're social people, we're fundraisers, we like to be out there, we like to be communicating with people, we're great listeners, we're great talkers, we're just social. Well, sometimes when we get nervous, we talk too much. So the donor should be speaking more than you. So during the solicitation, you really want to ask open-ended questions and then really deeply listen. I've seen fundraisers where they go in and they start to get to the ask and they just keep talking and talking and talking and talking. And then it's like the end of the meeting and they're like, "Oh yeah, would you consider a gift?" And the person's like glazed over, exhausted, and hasn't really been paying attention for the last 20 minutes. You don't want to get to that point with your donor. When you're on solicitation visit, you want to make sure it's engaging, it's joyful, that you're talking about big change, and that you are going in with a very specific purpose of asking for that gift and receiving feedback. When you go in with that purpose, you don't talk as much as maybe you normally would. So leave some airtime for your prospect or donor, and then ask really good questions. Now, I'm going to go ahead and link my 15 best questions to ask during cultivation in the podcast notes so you can grab those. And there's some real gems in there. Things like, what change do you want to make in the world? Or what does your legacy look like? Like, what do you want your legacy to be? I mean, these are questions you don't always want to ask on the very first visit, but they're deep. And as your relationship progresses with these prospects and donors, these are very natural questions and they're going to get you to the solicitation. Now, when you're in solicitation, you definitely don't want to talk too much. The other thing that happens is, and some fundraisers know this, others don't. So I'm just going to kind of put it out there. If you know it, high five. If you don't, you're going to learn something new. When you ask for a gift, you want to be quiet. Like you want to say, would you consider a gift of $50,000 to support X program? And then you want to be quiet. The next person to talk should be the donor. And what happens is you've just made this ask, right? What you've been so nervous about for weeks, days, hours, minutes. You've put it out there and you're about to get your answer, but those 10 seconds of silence feels like a year. However, do not speak. Let the donor process and answer. And it's really interesting, once you get, hundreds of solicitations under your belt, you actually start to see that when you ask someone for a gift, they're not just sitting there quietly. I mean, they're actually thinking, like you can see the wheels turning, and they're thinking things like, "Oh, I've got twin granddaughters and I promised I would pay for their college and they're seniors this year. So how's that going to play? And, I need to, I'm now turning 59 and a half and I need to start taking distributions from my 401k." Like all these things are kind of going through their mind. So just remember that if it's an awkward silence for, 5 to 10 seconds, they're actually thinking, they're in their mind. It's very active. So even though you're sitting there quietly, just know that after you ask, let them be the first to talk. Even if it takes 30 seconds, that's okay. Mistake number 3 is not being clear about what you're asking for. You have to be specific. You never want to go into a solicitation and say, "Would you consider supporting us?" There's no there. What you do want to say is, "Would you consider a $250,000 gift to fund this new cancer research drug? Would you consider a $25,000 gift to fund 300 girls to go to Girl Scout camp this summer?" Whatever it is, be very specific. Would you consider, and then I want you to put a gift amount in there, a gift amount that's appropriate, and then to fund something very specific. Now, there's a lot of organizations that really want unrestricted dollars. The challenge with that is that the larger the gift, the more restrictions are typically put on it. So, for example, if somebody's going to give you $1 million, they want to know that 500,000 is going to an endowment and the other 500,000 is going to their favorite program. It would be very rare to have someone just say, I'm going to give you $1 million and you can just use it for whatever you want. Now, if you have those donors and they're giving you large gifts for general operations, they deserve a parade. So just know that. And it's really the ultimate trust in your organization. However, the devil's in the details here when you're making an ask. You have to be very clear. So whether it's for a program, whether it's for general ops, make sure that you include a dollar amount and include what that is going to, like, what impact is that going to make? Even if it's general fund, if you're serving meals to, 300 seniors a day, and that's just your general operating fund, then you could say, would you consider a $40,000 gift to feed, 3,000 meals this month? That's a very compelling ask. Now, if you're a frequent Hey Fundraiser podcast listener, you also know that I'm a big believer in ask once and thank for 364 days. The beauty of this, and I tell my coaching clients all the time, is you're going in with a very specific solicitation, but you're really planning out the year. So you're saying to your donor, okay, let's sit down and look at what 2026 looks like. And in that could be, a $10,000 gift at the end of the year or on Giving Tuesday, and it's a match, whatever it is. You're also going to include an entire menu of things. We want you to buy a table to the gala, and at that gala, we want you to raise your paddle at the $10,000 mark to really create awesome energy in the room. Another option would be to host something in your home. Like, sit down with a whole menu. It really turns the solicitation into a negotiation. And then you're much less likely to get a no. If you go into someone's home and you're asking them and you've got 6 things on a list, they're going to do one of the 6. So it really mitigates that fear. And it also really helps you plan the year because, it's not in my list of biggest mistakes fundraisers make, but it could be, is just asking too much. So for too many years, I over solicited. Oh, my poor donors. I would ask for a gift and for here, our gala's coming up. Can you buy a $3,000 table? And then a couple months later, it's year end. And so I'm soliciting them for a year end gift. And then, 3 months later, spring rolls around and it's time for the golf tournament. And I just was asking way too much. And that's how I came up with this idea to ask once and just thank for 364 days. So the biggest mistake is not being clear. If you're going to go in and ask for a very specific gift, that's a good thing. And you would say, would you consider a gift of X amount to fund Y initiative? The other option for you is to really go in with a menu and say, we'd love for you to pick 4 out of these 6 things. And the rest of the year, we'll just follow the plan, but we have it all mapped out and we'll negotiate it today. It's a lovely, lovely way to engage a donor. Okay, mistake number 4, it's a biggie, not handling objections well. I want to be very clear. Objections are not rejections. They're just part of the conversation. So be prepared for their response and that it might be a no or a not yet, and be prepared with what you want to say. I'm also going to have another download in the show notes for this because I'm a big fan of Jerry Panis. And Jerry Panis, brilliant man, sadly passed away a couple years ago. His philosophy was how to turn a no into a maybe and a maybe into a yes. And the way he did this was by having questions in his back pocket to pull out if somebody objected to a gift. And there's really kind of 3 or 4 big questions. So I'm going to link, I have a free download that kind of goes through Jerry's thinking on this. And it's really brilliant and it's really helpful. So if you want to go to the show notes and download that, I think that's really going to help, especially if you have fear, of asking for a gift. Now, let's unpack that fear for 1 second here. The fear technically isn't asking for a gift. The fear is getting a no. I mean, you're going to ask for something and you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable position. Like you might get a no, or like kind of like the things I said at the top of this podcast, like I'm going to ruin this relationship, or they're never going to take my call again. And, all these things that really have never happened. But the fear is getting the no. And so if you can really find your responses to objections, you are well ahead of the game, my friend. So the very first ask, I went out on my own. It was a $25,000 ask from a woman who gave $25,000 a year. And she said no to me. And I was so shook. I was like, I'm cringing. I'm going to say this out loud, but I'm embarrassed. So I asked her for that $25,000 gift and she said no. And I didn't ask any questions. I kind of was like, well, okay, see you later, which was not the right thing to do. I mean, I can laugh now, but back then I'm pretty sure I cried about it. While we're, speaking our truths here. And I was just so shocked. I mean, I just thought it was such a layup. Like she was giving $25,000 a year. She gave $25,000 a year for like the past decade. And the problem is that I never asked questions. Well, 3 months later in the mail, I got a gift for $25,000 with a little handwritten note that said, "Hey, Mary, here's my gift. I just couldn't, I had money tied up in an investment and I just couldn't make the gift when you asked, but that money's free and here you go." Oh my gosh. And I spent months. I'm actually happy for this experience, even though it was so painful, because it caused me to go on this entire research rabbit hole. Like I never wanted to get a no again. Like it was just so painful. I think I left. I skipped words in my goodbye. It was so painful. But it did really cause me to go. I mean, I read books. I spent probably the next 6 months figuring out okay, what am I going to do if somebody else says no to me? Because I did not handle that well. And Jerry Panis was one of the, voices that I found. And he just made so much sense to me. And he helped me actually get over a ton of fear. So go to the show notes and download that little document. So this is the biggest mistake, is not being able to handle objections. And again, objections are not rejections. It could be timing. It could be that they need more information. It could be that they need somebody else to help them make the decision. It could be that they need another person in the solicitation, the president of the university or a board member that they know and trust. There's so many things that it could be. And so when you have those questions in your back pocket, then you can handle objections really well. Plus, just so it's said out loud, a no is never really a no. A no is just not right now. So keep that in your back pocket. Okay, our 5th and final mistake is failing to follow up. I see this too often when in my major gift coaching clients. So they'll go out, they'll ask for a gift, they'll do all the things. They don't talk too much. They ask at the right time. They have a very clear ask. They're ready to handle objections. And then the donor says, "Well, let me think about it." Or, "Gosh, I need to talk to my wife," or "I need to talk to my attorney or CPA," or "Maybe I just need to sleep on it." And what happens is a lot of fundraisers take that as a no. That is not a no. If you have built a trusting, authentic relationship with this donor and they say to you, I need a night to think about it, or let me sleep on it, then you have to call the next day and say, how's your thinking going? Did you have any revelations? Did you have a chance to talk with your CPA? I mean, you don't have to follow up the next day on that particular CPA thing, but you have a good relationship with this donor. They're telling you they need time. Don't ghost them. So you want to follow up every solicitation, whether it's a yes or a no, or I need to think about it, or I don't know. The very next day, or when you get back to your office, you should send a thoughtful email or note, whether if it's a yes, it should be, I'm so excited. We're going to make amazing change in the world together, and make it very, program specific, organization specific. If it's a no, you want to follow up with, again, a thoughtful email or note or call in the next week that says, I've been thinking about our meeting and, I either have more questions, or how can I help you make a decision? Or is there any information you need from me to guide your thought process? Whatever it is, just make sure to stay in touch. Then if it's a no, then again, follow up with a phone call, a thoughtful email, or a note that really says, I'm really grateful that you spoke your truth. And that's the kind of relationship we want with our donors. And I'll keep you in mind for future opportunities. And that's okay. So you don't want to fail in the follow-up. And a lot of fundraisers also, they get the gift and they think, oh, well, this is wrapped up with a bow. And then they kind of just move on to the next prospect. So it's not just failing up. It's not just failing to follow up. It's failing to follow up in all circumstances. Even with a yes, I see fundraisers not doing the proper stewardship. Mistakes happen, but this podcast is here to help you with the right approach so that you absolutely nail your next solicitation. So at the end of the day, don't ask too soon. Don't talk too much in your solicitation meeting. Don't have an opaque or unclear ask. You want to be as specific as possible with a dollar amount and a project. You want to be able to handle objections gracefully, beautifully, confidently, and that just comes with practice. And in the download, you should go to the show notes. And then failing to follow up. So if you can avoid those 5 mistakes, you are ahead of 90% of the other fundraisers out there. Now, you probably think of other mistakes. Like these are the top 5 that I kind of thought of and that my coaching clients, struggle with. But I would love to hear what I've missed and what other mistakes you think are just either really hard to overcome or are just this pesky problem that just keeps rearing its ugly head. So I'm going to post a link in the show notes where you can leave me a voicemail. It's called SpeakPipe. I would love to know when people send me SpeakPipes, it helps me build future podcasts. And so if there's a topic, if there's a mistake you want me to dig into, anything like that, go ahead and click the link in the show notes. Okay, fundraiser, until next time. Hey fundraiser, thanks so much for being here today. Did you know that we create a special page for each episode that contains helpful links, episode highlights, standout quotes, and freebies? Check it out in today's podcast description. If you loved what you heard today, would you kindly give us a rating and review? It really helps other fundraising professionals find our Hey Fundraiser community. I'm Mary Peterson, and thank you for listening.